So let's jump right in. Today, we're going to unpack a framework that honestly changes how you see, well, everything, from huge scientific breakthroughs to the limits of your own thinking. It's a pattern that shows us why we get stuck, and more importantly, how we get unstuck. We're calling it the F to F plus framework. And believe it or not, it all started with a single late night thought, right? Think about that. Just over a century ago, the absolute smartest people alive were pretty sure physics was basically done, solved, and they couldn't have been more wrong. But that mistake, it isn't just some funny footnote in a history book. It's a pattern, a deep pattern that just repeats and repeats. And once you see it, you start to see it absolutely everywhere. So let's break it down. To really get a handle on this pattern, we need a metaphor. I want you to imagine that all of your thinking, all your ideas, everything, it's all happening inside of a box. But here's the kicker. It's a box you can't even see. Okay, so we're going to call this box F for our formal system. It's built on a foundation of axioms. These are the truths we just assume are true without needing proof. Things like parallel lines never meet. The really tricky part, though, is that from inside your own box, you can't see the walls. Your axioms don't feel like assumptions. They just feel like obvious reality. But what if they're not? Well, if you look back through history, you find that the whole engine of progress is basically just people figuring out how to break out of these boxes. Let's look at a couple of ideas that for a very long time were considered completely, utterly impossible. Let's start with the square root of -1. For centuries, this thing was a joke. I mean, they literally called it imaginary as an insult. Back in 1545, it was just this weird mathematical cheat you had to use sometimes. Fast forward to 1799, and we finally figured out what it meant geometrically. But then, by 1925, we discovered something truly mind-blowing. The universe itself, reality, actually runs on it. And that right there, that perfectly shows you the jump. We go from one system, our box F, where this idea is just total nonsense, to a new, bigger system, F+, where that exact same idea is absolutely essential for describing the world. And it's the same deal with geometry. For 2,000 years, the idea that parallel lines could ever meet was just absurd. It was one of those fundamental, obvious truths. And then Einstein comes along and shows us that in the real universe, thanks to gravity, they absolutely can. That obvious truth was never a truth about the universe. It was just a truth about the box we were in. So you start to see this really clear, repeatable pattern, right? First, you have an axiom that feels completely self-evident, obvious. Then someone comes along and challenges it, and they almost always get laughed at or called a fool. But then their new system, the F+, turns out to be way more powerful. And the old system, F, well, it gets revealed for what it always was, just a small special case inside a much, much bigger reality. But here's where it gets really wild. This isn't just some interesting pattern from history. Oh no. There is a deep, profound mathematical proof that guarantees this process of breaking out of boxes has to go on forever. And getting your head around this is the key to this whole framework. Okay, so back in 1931, a logician named Gödel did something that just shattered the foundations of math. He figured out a clever way for a mathematical system to talk about itself, and he used it to construct a sentence that basically says, this statement cannot be proven using the rules of this system. Now, just take a second to think about that. If the system could prove the statement is true, well then the statement itself would be false, right? Which creates a paradox. The whole system breaks. So the only way for the system to stay consistent is if it can't prove it, which means the statement has to be true. It's a true statement that is impossible to prove from inside the box. And that leads to this just staggering conclusion. The sentence is true, but it's fundamentally unreachable from within the system. It means there are truths that the box, our F, can never ever get to. Every single box we can ever build is leaky. It's incomplete. This is the real gift of what Gödel discovered. He didn't find some flaw in logic that we should be sad about. Not at all. He gave us a mathematical guarantee of endless discovery. He proved, in a way, that the staircase of knowledge goes up forever. No matter what box we're currently in, there is always an F+ waiting for us just outside. So this raises a pretty huge question. If all our conceptual boxes are incomplete, where do they even come from? Why do we build these particular boxes with these particular axioms?
And this brings us to a really cool idea called the sensor hypothesis. The theory is that the axioms we find so obvious aren't random at all. They're a direct result of our hardware, our biological senses, and the technology we use. The way we perceive the world literally constrains the kind of physics and math we're able to come up with.
I mean, just think about our own senses. They're amazing. But let's be real. They evolved to help us survive on the savannah, not to understand the ultimate nature reality. We see this tiny sliver of the light spectrum. Our brains are hardwired for 3 dimensions of space. Our obvious truths aren't truths of the universe. They're artifacts of these built-in limitations. So how do we get out? How do we expand the box? We build new sensors. You could make the case that the entire history of science is really just the history of building new tools to see new layers of reality. Every single one of these instruments, from a simple telescope to a massive particle accelerator, it expands our perception, it shatters the old F, and it gives us access to a brand new, way more powerful F+. Let's just do a quick thought experiment. What if, for a second, you could genuinely see in 11 dimensions? Or what if you could feel quantum entanglement as deeply and intuitively as you feel gravity pulling you down right now? Seriously, what would become obvious to you? The concepts in modern physics that we struggle with, that seem so bizarre, they might be as simple to a creature with different senses as don't walk off a cliff is to us. Our formal system, our F, is a direct product of our perception. Okay, so let's bring all these threads together. Gödel gives us the guarantee that the staircase is infinite. The sensor hypothesis tells us exactly how to build the next step. And this is exactly why the technologies emerging right now are so incredibly important. We're talking about AI, quantum computing, brain-computer interfaces. These aren't just faster ways of doing the same old stuff. No, they are fundamentally new ways of knowing. They are new sensors. They're going to give us access to new realities, maybe even new kinds of mathematics that right now we literally can't even imagine. And this, for me, is the most exciting and hopeful part of this whole idea. Realizing that all our knowledge is incomplete isn't a failure. It's a promise. It's a guarantee that the great adventure of discovery has really only just begun. We're not at the end of the story. We're barely at the beginning. So this leaves us with a challenge for you and for me. What axiom in your own life or in your job or just in your own thinking, what feels so completely obvious that it's beyond question? Because if this framework is right, that's exactly where the next step up the infinite staircase is waiting for you to find it.